So our project is Alpha Brewing Company, new hire orientation safety program. Our focus is to ensure all employees have the resources and information to make safe decisions. This includes training on recognition, avoidance, abatement, and prevention in the workplace. The number of non-fatal injuries and illnesses in breweries are up 57% since 2010. Our mission is to reduce that. One of those ways is by walking working surfaces. Fall hazards are present in our brewery. Employees will know how to identify and how to stay away from fall hazards. All places of employment, passageways, storerooms, service rooms, and walking working surfaces need to be kept in a clean, orderly, and sanitary condition. If any liquid is on the floor, employees must clean up the mess immediately and warn others with a visual indicator, such as a wet floor sign. When using ladders, employees will not carry any object that can cause the employee to lose balance or fall while climbing the ladder. They will face the ladder, climbing upwards with the balance on their toes. They will ensure ladder surfaces are free of puncture and laceration hazards. They will tie the ladders so they do not slip away from the wall. They will know the maximum intended load and will not exceed that load, and they will check the ladder every time before they use it. So, general environment controls. Sanitation is extremely important in our brewery. If our work environment lacks a basic level of sanitation, our products stand the chance of contamination. Employees will understand that washing facilities shall be maintained in a sanitary condition and to report it if conditions are not met. Washing hands is required for all employees after they're done using the restroom. Consumption of food and beverages on the premises is prohibited, but we do have designated areas if you would like to eat on our property. In the event that a hazard is present, employees will know the safety color code for knowing physical hazards. Red shall be the basic color code for the identification of fire protection equipment and apparatus. It is also a symbol for danger, and it is also a symbol for stopping. Emergency stop bars on hazardous machines or stop buttons will all be labeled with the red color. Yellow is the basic color of the identification of designating caution. And it is also a marking of physical hazards such as striking against, stumbling, falling, tripping, and even caught in between.
Recording and reporting occupational injuries and illnesses are required by OSHA website to inform them when an employee is injured. All employees must fill out this injury report to show what kind of injury or illness they have received while on the job. First starts off with Form 300. It must be filled out when any injury occurs on the site. First, you must describe the case. So what happened, when did it happen, and could it have been prevented? The next is to classify the case. Mark on whether the injury caused death, days away from work, remained at work, but caused job transfer restrictions, or other cases. Also, mark how many days they had missed. Next is finally mark the injury. Column on what kind of injury they received, whether it's injury, skin, conditional poisoning, hearing loss, or all other illnesses. Next is Form 300A. Employer needs to update this form every time an employee is injured, every year. First, the employer must fill out the number of cases there are each year. number of days they missed or transferred, and the injury or illness type. The injury and illness incident report is one of the first forms that you must fill out when an employee is injured. Fill out all information about the employee that is injured. So now is Form 301. You must fill out all information about employees, their name, their home address. They also, what kind of injury they received, how severe their injury was, and how long they missed work.
This is part 1910, subscript E for emergency planning. And in the time of an emergency, employees should know what type of evacuation is necessary and their role in carrying out the plan. Employees must be sure that they know what is expected of them in such an emergency, in all such emergencies, possibilities which have been planned in order to provide assurance of the safety from the fire and other emergency. All wardens and fellow employees should be made aware of handicapped employees who may need extra assistance. And right here is a picture of our building. And as you see, the escape route for example, if you're standing right here, you have multiple exits in case of if one exit is blocked by a fire or other objects are in the way, you have multiple exits. And as you can see, there's multiple exits in each of the rooms or manufacturing areas for multiple different occasions. If a fire is blocking one of these exits, you could possibly go out a different way that is not too far. And other safety measures we have are emergency telephones, which are labeled by the phone, the green and the phone, which are right here, and that is in the office aisle as well, so that makes sense why it was there. First aid is in most every building, or just once. Right there. A fire extinguisher is in every room within 100 feet, and a fire hose reel is as labeled as right here. And a fire alarm call point is in every room of the manufacturing process of the beer. Emergency telephones are in all the rooms as well. Evacuation assembly point is on the outside of the building, I'm assuming around the fire line around the building. Part 1910, subpart P, tool use and inspection. Every tool that we use will be inspected thoroughly before use, and disinfecting is the most important thing in processing something that is consumed by a human. Employees will be trained on how to properly inspect the tools before proceeding with them. The following tools that need to be managed are listed below. Compressed gas cylinders. Safe management should protect the integrity of the cylinder valve at all times and prevent the release of hazardous energy and chemicals. Energy isolation or lockout and tagout. During the cleaning, repairing, servicing, setting up or adjusting of machines and equipment, employees must be protected from the unexpected energizing of or startup of the equipment. And every equipment has multiple lockouts labeled by who has to lock it out and tag it out.
Okay, the next part is part 1910, subpart E covers fire protection. Alright, to start off, all of our employees are going to be trained to recognize potential fire hazards and go over the resources that they have available to them, just in general. Afterwards, we're going to be giving them a rundown of the main fire hazards in our actual workplace. So the main types of fires that'll be happening in our brewery will probably be a chemical fire or electrical fire. So in case of that, we're going to have a fire protection training where we're going to show them how to properly use fire extinguishers and which types of fire extinguishers to use for each type. Also, in case there is an emergency where we can't put out the fire, we're going to physically show every single employee all of the emergency exits and make sure they know what to do and where to go in case they have to evacuate the building. And finally, we're going to make sure each and every one of our fire extinguishers are routinely inspected and are accessible to our employees anywhere in the building. Also, for some general rules that we've added on, we're going to restrict smoking to a designated area to make sure we don't have smoking near potential fire hazards. That could be a disaster. Also, our flammable materials are going to be stored in OSHA-approved containers, and we're going to store them in a designated area. We don't want to store them near exits in case we have to evacuate or near choke points so that people can't get caught into a fire. And finally, we're going to make sure they are nowhere close to our high heat machinery that we have operating in our brewery. Up next is 1910 subpart Z, covers bloodborne pathogens. Our employees will be taught all of the health hazards and the risks that can come with coming in contact with pathogens. And we'll be training them how to recognize we'll be teaching them all the potential sources of exposure in which they can possibly become infected. Our first rules are actually for the supervisors. We're going to make sure they identify the employees that are most likely to not only come in contact with bloodborne pathogens, but coming to an accident that can cause it to happen to begin with. These most likely employees are going to be working with machinery or working with glass, or supervisors will go ahead and they'll try to come up with a procedure to minimize the chances, whether using PPE or engineering controls, some type of way to make sure people don't get cut and bleed everywhere. And finally, they're also going to develop a post-exposure plan in case someone does come in contact with bodily fluids, whether we have to designate someone specifically to clean up the mess and make sure people know to stay away from bodily fluids. Alright, so since we're going to be using a designated person, we're going to have all of our standard employees treat any type of incident as if they were known contaminants, just to make sure we want to eliminate the risk of anyone getting infected with pathogens at all costs. So we're also going to be providing employees or the designated people who clean up the messes and clean up the bloodborne pathogens, the bodily fluids, and we're going to we're going to have first aid kits and body fluid cleanup kits easily accessible for any of our employees. So gloves, sponges, anything like that, towels that we can need to get all this stuff cleaned up so that no one gets infected. And finally, we're going to make sure all of our contaminated surfaces, equipment, any of our drinks, products that have been possibly been contaminated, make sure they're absolutely clear before we start shipping them out, start working in that area again before moving on.
So now I'll talk about part 1910, subpart 1, personal protection equipment. This is all the equipment that you'd wear to keep yourself safe. For example, first off, all our workers in the brewery are commonly exposed to toxic chemicals and hazardous vapors and boiling water on a regular basis. So all the workers will be required to have PPE, protective or personal protective equipment. So first, they're going to have eye protection. One, for the boiling water, so that none of that evaporates into our eyes because of the chemicals in the water could cause, you could lose your vision or have to have surgery for anything that could happen. Second off, you're going to have all workers will have hand protection. They'll all have gloves so that whenever they are working with those chemicals, nothing will burn them. And also, they will be able to conserve heat. So if you have to carry anything very hot or anything like that, you won't burn yourself. And the clothing that will be required, all will cover all the clothing will cover your torso, your legs, and your arms. So long sleeve shirts, long pants, and no ankles will be seen. And also you'll need the proper shoes. As working in a brewery, things can get a little slippery, so you're going to make sure you have a lot of grip whenever you're walking around the factory. But you also want to have steel-toe boots just in case anything heavy falls onto your feet. It will protect your feet. Up next, for Part 1910, Subpart N, materials, handling, and storage. Employees must ensure aisles and passageways are clear of obstacles. So if an employee comes into a hallway and sees that there's something in the way, they should definitely let somebody know so that that problem can be resolved. Materials must be stored in its designated area and properly stacked to prevent falling or sliding of material. So all of our shelves will be checked on a regular basis to make sure there's no angles so that the kegs will fall, and make sure that they're sturdy enough to hold all the kegs. Employees also must provide proper housekeeping regularly to these storage areas to prevent hazards. So we will make sure that the aisles are cleaned daily. At the end of the day, a janitor will come in, but whenever there is anything wet on the floor, we will make sure that we put a caution sign up so that all employees are aware of their surroundings. And supervisors must keep signs to warn the clearance limits. So whenever a shelf may be high enough that you could go under it, it'll still have caution, you may hit your head, so that the employee knows. For Subpart O, machinery and machine guarding, this is all the protection for whenever you're working with the machine so that you know what you can and can't do with it. Our work environment possesses potentially life-threatening machinery. Employees will understand the significance of personal safety around these machines and use of proper PPE. So if you're working around a machine and it could snag you, we want to make sure that nobody has loose clothing. Also, jewelry, it could get broken or it could melt, you never know. But you don't want anything wrong to happen to your jewelry. And long hair must also kept back. So first off, we will provide hair nets / rubber bands to keep hair back. And there will be a locker in place for all the employees to keep their jewelry and loose clothing. And we will have also some backup clothing. So if a worker came and they didn't have the proper clothing, we can provide them with that so that they can get their job done. Also with that, employees will understand not to alter or bypass any safety guards or devices when operating mechanical equipment such as forklift, lighting machines, mill grinders, hot steam generators, pressurized tanks. So with that, we want to make sure that all of our employees are trained properly when using these. So if an employee is not trained properly, we will make sure that they're trained properly, or if they're not, they will not be using the machine. Thank you.
And
We are Alpha Brewing Company.